Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. So, I got sent this video on my Discord channel called How Not to Write a Female Villain from a channel called Toon. I'd not heard of the channel before, and so I knew nothing about their work. According to the individual who sent the video, though, he apparently does a lot of really good videos. But apparently this one was just a big mess. No problem there, by the way. Even the most excellent content creators make mistakes, even the best ones, you know? I mean, except me. I never make mistakes. Yeah, that was a joke, by the way. Joking aside, as a writer and someone who loves analyzing character writing, I decided I would check out this video, and after watching it, yeah, I got some stuff to say. Before I begin, though, let's try to change my avatar. I usually try to use one of my friend's art for my avatar for this, but do I have a villainous image of myself? Like, this'll do. This'll do. Okay, got it. All right, let's get started.
When a man wants power, we call him ambitious. When a woman wants the same, she's unstable, jealous, or just needs to be redeemed.
Not always. I mean, firstly, the terms here don't really fit very well. Ambition is not counter to jealousy or instability. You can have an ambitious character who is ambitious because they are jealous or unstable. What this opening comparison does is it creates a false dichotomy that male characters that seek power are always called just ambitious, which is good, but female characters seeking the same are not ambitious, but rather jealous, unstable, or in need of redemption. But why are these things mutually exclusive is my question. Can a female villain not be both jealous and ambitious? Also, can a male villain not be called these same things? Scar and Hades are male villains who certainly were ambitious, but it was spawned from a point of jealousy. The desire for power in itself is ambitious. Seeking to accomplish a difficult task is ambitious. Jealousy is the motivating factor. Instability is a personality deficiency. And then needs redemption. That's going to need some explanation, but all right, let's keep going.
Thanos wipes out half the universe, and we call him complex. Joker burns a city, and he's a misunderstood genius. But when a woman dares to be a villain, she has to be beautiful, broken, or dead within minutes. Welcome to animation's double standard.
Okay, there's there's much to say about these last few claims. So, Thanos destroys half the known universe, and he's complex for it. No, he is not complex because of what he does. He's complex because of why he does it. Thanos' motivations are what made him complex. This is a misleading claim. Joker being called a misunderstood genius. No, again, this is misleading. Joker in The Dark Knight was not a misunderstood genius for burning Gotham. His ideology and outlook on society and the world made him out to be a psychopathic criminal genius. I wouldn't call him misunderstood because that word carries the assumption that if we understood him, we would have realized he's not so bad. But I think everyone who watched the movie knew in the end he was bad. He's bad, guys. But now let's look at this next part. Rather than point to a specific named character like you did with Thanos and Joker, you speak about women in general, and that feels really unfair. You say all women need to be pretty, broken, or dead in minutes. Okay, but you pick two specific male villains to dissect in comparison without looking at men in general. For example, what about Gaston? I think he meets a lot of this criteria that you're talking about. He's handsome, so he meets the pretty thing. Could someone not pull up Gaston and say, look, here's a pretty villain? Also, Gaston is dead in minutes. He barely puts up a fight against the Beast. He gets beaten pretty soundly. So is that not dead within minutes? What about Hans? Hans from Frozen. He's a pretty male villain, right? Plus, by the way, aren't both Gaston and Hans both driven by jealousy and base desires? There isn't a lot of complexity to either of them. I mean, the broken part, I'm sure there are male villains that can be broken too, and I know Gaston and Hans aren't that broken, but my point being said, imagine if you had picked just two male villains and two female villains, or just did general context of male and female. I don't know. This feels a little bit dishonest. Look, I'm not sure if I'm being clear here. Your thesis in this video seems to be that we have a double standard when writing villains. That seems to be the thesis. Males are always considered complex, misunderstood, and fascinating, while women are always relegated to just pretty or emotionally broken. But the manner by which you're approaching this is already dishonest. You have picked two very specific villains to make your case for the male side, but then generalize all women villains into three categories. But you knew you couldn't generalize the men too because male villains would actually meet the same criteria as the women in certain cases. In fact, many villains meet at least one of these three criteria regardless of criteria. All women villains must be pretty, broken, or emotionally unhinged. I can name many male villains who meet the same criteria. Hi, Fulgrim. I still need to read your book, don't I? My point is that male villains can be guilty of the same faults, and there are women villains not guilty of these faults. Ugh. We barely started this video. Let's just keep going.
Now, the truth is that female villains don't fail because they're bad characters, they fail because they were deliberately written to leave a sour note on our tongues. And the worst part is, it could all be easily avoided.
Okay.
The most dangerous thing a female villain can do isn't murder, world domination, or even genocide, because when a villainess steps into frame, an invisible timer activates, not counting down to her defeat, but to her inevitable neutering. You'll notice they all fit similar patterns, like not being allowed to stay evil or have a meaningful impact.
Okay, so women villains don't usually stay evil, and they don't have meaningful impact. Right. Well, you keep using clips and images of Mirage from The Incredibles. I wouldn't even really call her a villain, but more of a henchman to the villain syndrome. She worked for him because she was in love with him until she realized what a monster he was. I'm sorry, doesn't that make her complex? Perhaps if a female villain doesn't remain a villain, it might be because of contextual reasons, you know? Are you implying that a villain who is redeemed can't be complex or impactful? Actually, if I'm being honest, a lot of this whole redeeming women villain stuff is a recent phenomenon. Tell me, did we have a redemption arc for the original Evil Queen, or the stepmother, Lady Tremaine, Ursula, Zira, Ares, Darla Dimple, Fairy Godmother, Maleficent, Queen of Hearts, Cruella de Vil, Poison Ivy, Madame Mim? Up until recent years, all of these women were just not redeemable villainesses, and many were fascinating and made huge impacts on their respective stories. Ursula nearly took over the entire ocean. Madame Mim almost killed the future King Arthur. Darla succeeded in getting all the animals fired at Hollywood. Maleficent plunged an entire kingdom into disarray. And Fairy Godmother was literally able to manipulate the king to do what she wanted and was the face of Happily Ever After. And some of these women are incredibly complex and fascinating to follow, and very fun as well. It's only been in recent years we suddenly want to start making these women redeemable, and Lord knows why. Honestly, it's kind of annoying, so I'll grant you that much. I will grant you. If you're talking about how in recent years we've been doing this, you know what, I'm on your side on that one, but you've been showing a lot of these older villainesses, like the villainesses from the glory days, where I don't see that problem. I'm honestly not opposed to redeemable villains in media. Redemption can be a fascinating thing to explore in a character. Like, what were their motives? What were they seeking? Are there things so heinous you can't be redeemed for? I mean, okay, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'll grant you, it can be handled very childishly, like Nightmare Moon and My Little Pony, where the conflict was easily resolved in like 2 episodes, and she became a good guy within literally 3 sentences of a lecture. But that's a kid's show, so give it some slack, I guess. It's intended for little girls. Compare that to a character like Poison Ivy in Batman Arkham Knight. Yes, it's a video game series, but it requires a writer, so walk with me here. Ivy redeems herself by the end, and the process by which she gets there is a very interesting one. I think it was handled far better than I expected. So, I don't know. This is, guys, this all feels really weird. You know what? Moving on. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going on. Maybe we'll get somewhere. Well, maybe we'll get somewhere where I understand.
And they weren't written like this by accident. There's actually 4 tropes that kill female villains before they're even shown on the screen for the first time. First, the career woman must be evil. The most dangerous thing a female villain can do isn't murder, world domination, or even genocide. It's being a woman with a LinkedIn profile.
The most dangerous thing a woman can do is not murder, not world domination, or genocide. It's being a woman with a LinkedIn profile. Really? I hope you explain this.
Enter Evelyn Deavor, Pixar's answer to what if a woman was too successful? She's smart, driven, and the head of a tech empire. Sounds like the setup for a powerful, ideologically driven antagonist, right? Not quite, because the moment she steps on screen, she's less a villain and more a warning label. Ambitious? Evil. Single? Definitely evil. No kids? Get the pitchforks. She's not just a character, she's Hollywood's neon flashing, beware the career woman sign. Now, compare her with Elastigirl, a loving mother, balancing domesticity with superheroics. She's celebrated, centered, and given real emotional depth. Evelyn, she's written like the antithesis of maternal warmth, cold, calculating, and obsessed with logic. Her motivation is simple. People rely too much on superheroes. A potentially fascinating idea, especially in a world where accountability is rarely discussed. But instead of exploring it, the film flattens her into a mouthpiece with an evil TED Talk and a hypnosis gimmick. Even her reveal as the villain lacks weight. There's no sense of personal stakes, no true threat, and no emotional through line that ties her to the protagonist. She exists to fill the smart woman gone bad checkbox and vanish when Elastigirl gets her groove back. Meanwhile, in the first movie, Syndrome, another tech genius with a personal grudge, gets a full backstory, a symbolic arc, and giant robots. He even gets something more that a female villain can't have, which I'll explain later. On the other hand, Evelyn just gets a pair of evil glasses. This isn't just lazy writing, it's a pattern, because when women in media choose ambition over family, they're rarely shown as complex. They're shown as broken. And if she's not nurturing, then she'd better be punished. Evelyn Deavor never got the chance to be a true villain, because first, she had to prove she wasn't a bad woman.
Alright, so I'm gonna be honest, I have not watched Incredibles 2, so I can't speak with a degree of authority on this. Instead, I'm just going to dissect the argument as best as I can, which seems to be Evelyn Deavor is evil because she's a successful businesswoman. Though the movie does give her a motivation, it's not explored. She is guilty of only having a gimmick, being single and independent, and being the antithesis of the wholesome family woman that Elastigirl is. And therefore it is giving a message that career businesswomen who are successful are evil and bad and dangerous, while wholesome family women are good. Alright, so first of all, I read a synopsis of the film, and I read up on Evelyn's character, actions, and motivations, just so that I had an idea of what went on. Again, without having seen the movie myself, I see a few things just from reading the synopsis to point out. First, your initial argument is that Evelyn is a warning against a successful career woman, but is that really the problem? Is she villainous because she's successful or because she's rich or powerful? While you could make a case that Elastigirl and Evelyn are opposites, one being a simple family woman and the other a single career woman, I would pin that less on one being evil and the other not being evil, but rather the differences in life choices and approach. After all, do you know many male villains that have families, home lives, and kids? I mean, just as a comparison, but I digress. Second, what is her motivation? You argue that she is a successful and powerful woman, but she's not really ideologically fascinating. Okay, what is her ideology? You mentioned that she doesn't want people to become dependent on supers, but you don't say why. So I looked into it. It turns out that when she was a child, her father heard burglars breaking into the home, and rather than go to the safe room with his family, he tried to call a super to save them. But at that time, the Super Relocation Act was in effect, so no super could come. Thus, he was killed. Evelyn believed her father was too dependent on supers and not reliant on himself and doing what he needed to do. In fact, she pushes this ideology further. In one of her speeches to the populace, she says, Elastigirl doesn't save the day. She only postpones her defeat. And while she postpones her defeat, you eat chips and watch her invert problems that you are too lazy to deal with. Superheroes are part of your brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk, you watch talk shows. You don't play games, you watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk, every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves to rise from their couches, break a sweat, and participate in life. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourselves ever more powerless in the process, while you tell yourselves you're being looked after, that your interests are being served and your rights are being upheld, so that the system can keep stealing from you, smiling at you all the while. Go ahead, send your supers to stop me, grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am. So, From this speech alone, from this ideology alone, this is fascinating. It's also an ideology I'm sympathetic towards. We live in a society that wants immediate gratification and is more and more content to let others do work for us, whether it's other people or technology. We are becoming more lazy and complacent in our day-to-day lives, and to Evelyn, supers are just another byproduct of this. And this ideology was birthed from the loss of her father, and now she is using it as her motivation for what she does. Her ideology has grown into something even greater. So your argument that her ideology is not explored or even brought up is untrue. You also claim Syndrome has a backstory while Evelyn does not. Syndrome's backstory connects directly to Mr. Incredible, so it's more personal, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's superior. In fact, both Syndrome and Evelyn suffered trauma because of supers. Syndrome learned that putting your trust in your heroes leads to disappointment, while Evelyn learned that relying on heroes to save you makes you helpless to save yourself. Actually, you know what? I'll be honest. You know who Evelyn reminds me of? Lex Luthor. I mean, Lex Luthor is a super rich, technologically brilliant, successful career man and successful businessman. He doesn't have a super complicated backstory, but he recognizes the problem of hero worship. He is often worried that if mankind becomes dependent on heroes to solve their problems, it will make them weaker, and there was no good that can come from worshiping false gods like Superman. So, tell me, is Lex Luthor a warning against the successful businessman? Is he evil because he's a man with a LinkedIn profile? Is he wicked because he's powerful? Evelyn Deavor sounds like a female version of Lex Luthor. Now, am I saying that they're on the same part? No, absolutely not. And again, without having watched the movie, I can't say for sure how good Evelyn Deavor's story is done. Maybe, I haven't watched the movie. I can't speak to what I've seen. I can only speak to what I've seen and read online. Maybe there's more to the movie that I missed. Like, it could be that they don't really talk much about her ideology in the movie. Or it could be that they didn't handle her well in the movie, but the ideology itself was what was fascinating. And that could be possible, so I'm willing to give that olive branch here. But based only on what I've read, Evelyn Deavor sounds like a female Lex Luthor, and that's kind of awesome. I actually think this is a pretty unique villain. Not every villain needs to be like Syndrome and be a super flamboyant, outlandish villain. Sometimes the more subtle, more dangerous villains are the ones that you really need to look out for. The villains who you don't realize are villains. There's something about that can be kind of cool. But anyway, I digress. I've gone on about this for too long. Let's keep going.
Second, too pretty to be bad. Now, The Incredibles may be a masterpiece of animation, but even then, Disney couldn't resist Hollywood's most cynical formula for a female antagonist. Make her gorgeous, make her mysterious, make her meaningless. Mirage exemplifies this problem perfectly. Elegant silver hair, a slinky silhouette, voice like velvet.
He's attracted to power. So am I. It's a weakness.
Every part of her design screams allure. The film codes her beauty as dangerous, the femme fatale in animated form. She doesn't throw punches, she doesn't need to. Her power lies in how she moves, how she speaks, how she looks. Even her name tells you everything. Mirage, a trick of the eye, meant to be admired, never understood. At first, she plays the part perfectly, calculated, seductive, and instrumental in luring superheroes to their deaths. She seems like Syndrome's equal, or at least his closest confidant. She flirts with Mr. Incredible. She flirts with danger. There's even a flicker of romantic tension with Syndrome, suggesting she might be in this not for money or morals, but love. But then the illusion breaks. One scene flips her entire character. Mr. Incredible grabs her, threatens her, and Syndrome, the man she's been loyally helping, dismisses her life like it means nothing.
It'll be easy, like breaking a toothpick.
Suddenly, the story decides she's had enough. She switches sides, helps the heroes. Her redemption is quiet, unearned, and mostly off-screen. But more than that, it's inevitable, because her beauty disqualifies her from true villainy. She's too graceful, too poised, too elegant to really be bad. And in Hollywood logic, if a woman looks like that, she must have a heart of gold under all that satin and smolder. It's a trope so ingrained we barely notice it. The beautiful woman isn't allowed to stay evil because beauty is equated with goodness. There's always exceptions to this, but more often than not, if she's elegant, she falls short.
All right, so this is pretty bad. So let's talk about this. Too pretty to be bad. The obvious argument being made is that a beautiful woman can't be evil, at least not for good. Your example is Mirage. Well, let's first ask the question, is Mirage evil? Not necessarily. Mirage admits she's attracted to power, Syndrome has power, and it's heavily implied she admires him for it and probably even has romantic interests in him based on how Syndrome talks to her. It is implied that they have a romantic connection. Now, this would imply that, like you said, she's not in it for the money or for morals, but for love. Either love or Syndrome himself or his power and ability, but I digress. This doesn't equate to evil necessarily. In fact, we see that she has some degree of morality. When she hears Elastigirl on the plane radio saying there are children on board, she actually has a panicked expression.
Abort! Abort! There are children aboard! Say again, there are children aboard this! No!
She knows this is wrong. She even sounds remorseful upon saying the target was destroyed.
Target was destroyed.
You'll get over it. I seem to recall you prefer to work alone.
She's not an evil person, but probably in over her head. She thought that she was helping the man she loved become the hero he always wanted to be, only to see that she was walking down a dark road herself. You then trivialize the scene when Mr. Incredible threatens her. You say the scene ruins her because the movie decides at this point it's time for her to be good now. Well, I'm sorry, but let's really unpack that. If she was only invested in Syndrome for love and the man she loved just gambled with her very life, wouldn't she have every right to be resentful and angry? I mean, I would be. I'd be furious that a person I was devoted to and cared about decided they'd risk my life just to prove a point. You also left out another important part. After sparing her life, Syndrome mocks Mr. Incredible for it, which reveals to her that Syndrome, despite wanting to be a hero, has no value of human life and doesn't respect compassion. That's why we have this scene compared to this scene.
I knew you couldn't do it, even when you have nothing to lose. You're weak. And I've outgrown you.
He's not weak, you know.
What?
Valuing life is not weakness.
Oh, hey, look, if you're talking about what happened in the containment unit, I had everything under control.
And disregarding it is not strength.
And then there's also another thing that I just thought about. You call Mirage a villain, but what is her motivation? Most villains have a motivation or goal for why they want to do evil, usually because they're psychopathic monsters or because they want revenge or because they want something. What does she want? It's never explained, which is why it's easy to believe she's only doing this because she loves Syndrome and she wants to support him. But if her only motivation for doing any of this is for Syndrome, and Syndrome just tossed her life around like a pile of trash in the trash bin, yeah, there goes her motivation to do any of this. I feel like she's a moral woman who got swept up in the idea of helping build up her hero, and now her hero has revealed himself to be the villain. But with all that said, like I said, I'd hardly call Mirage a villain. More of a henchman or female fatale to be the main villain. But let's move on from that. You then say, after you talk about Mirage, that beautiful women aren't allowed to stay evil. And while you admit that there are exceptions to this rule, as a general rule, this is not upheld as the norm. Okay, I will concede that point to a certain extent, but that's not a sexism thing, that's a human nature thing. We often perceive beauty as good and ugly as evil, but that's not exclusive to girls, that applies to men too. Most early Disney male villains aren't really attractive themselves, but at the same time, there's a term called the femme fatale. We brought it up earlier. You mentioned it earlier. A beautiful woman who is infamous for being dangerous or destructive to those who they get involved with. Mirage is a great example of a femme fatale, but she's a woman with complexity beyond her beauty, which is something I thought you wanted in her character. Don't you want more complex female characters? But you also have other characters like Suzanne from To Die For, Catwoman and Poison Ivy from Batman, Catherine from Cruel Intentions. These are some examples of beautiful femme fatales. Look, I don't know, man. I know you said that there were exceptions, but I don't see Hollywood fully shying away from it either. I don't see them as always just saying, okay, beautiful woman can be evil, ugly woman can be evil. I don't see that all the time. But regardless, okay, these are just some bad takes. Let's keep going.
Just like Queen Nerissa in Enchanted, a villain with Susan Sarandon's voice, stunning wardrobe, and a fabulous presence, but then The first time she actually gets to be evil, she morphs into a dragon, erasing her human identity, and dies in 20 seconds flat. Beautiful characters don't truly get to become a villainess. They're there just to be a pretty face to draw a crowd. Studios want the aesthetic of dangerous women without the actual danger. This is why almost all female villains end up the same.
I don't really feel the need to repeat my point, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I've never watched Enchanted, but wasn't the evil queen always evil before she turned into a dragon? I don't know, someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. Are you saying, no, genuinely, are you saying that a villain can only be counted as a villain when they actually start taking villainous actions like attacking the heroes or whatever? In that case, I brought them up earlier, but Gaston and Hans are both male villains who don't actually take action against the protagonist in a meaningful way until the very end and get defeated very easily. So do they not count? I don't know. This all feels very willfully dismissive.
You thought looks were the only thing that matter? You'll soon learn that it's not just what you see. Even the things that they hide deep down are basically replicated, just like the downfall in the third trope. Male villains get to chase power, revenge, ideology, sometimes even justice twisted beyond recognition. Female villains, 9 times out of 10, they're just insecure.
I find this hilarious, given the very first woman you brought up in this video had an actual ideological reason for why she did what she did, not based on insecurity or jealousy. One of your previous points actually contradicts this one. But okay, I'll hear you out.
Take Mother Gothel from Tangled. She kidnaps a child, locks her in a tower, gaslights her for nearly 2 decades, and emotionally manipulates her into fearing the outside world. This isn't just villainy, it's psychological warfare. And yet, what drives all of this? Not greed, not vengeance, just wrinkles? That's it. Her entire scheme, every ounce of cruelty, is to keep her skin from aging.
And that's not a good motivation? I mean, you can phrase it in a trivial way, but you do know that fear of aging and dying is a real fear people have, right? There are many stories about how people do heinous things to achieve eternal youth and beauty. She is greedy. She is self-centered. And that's at the root of most villains. Yeah, she's not interested in being a queen or getting all the money in the world, but her motivation is no less understandable. What are you saying, that her motivation needs to be less petty? I'm sorry, but this feels so dishonest. I think most villain motivations can be relegated down to pettiness when you really unpack it. Here, I'll prove it. You say at the start of this point that male villains get to chase power, revenge, ideology, and twisted justice. But women are just insecure. Okay. Well, let's think on that for a second. We already know that some women have ideological reasons for their evil. You literally mentioned it earlier, Evelyn. But what about power? Ursula, maybe, the Sea Witch and the Little Mermaid, she was pretty obsessed with power. Revenge, Zira from Lion King 2 wanted revenge for Simba killing Scar. I haven't even touched on anime, which is a laundry list of complex women villains with unique reasons and ideologies behind their evil deeds. Look, the funny thing is that you call women just insecure. Is insecurity not a term that could be used to define what a lot of villains are like? I mean, here's the thing. I think it comes down to this. Your argument is that male villains, their motivations are not petty, but female villains are almost always petty. And I think that's wrong. I think when you really unpack most villains' reasons for why they do what they do, they all come off as petty to some extent. And here's why. Because we as human beings can be petty. We can be petty. The difference is villains act on their pettiness. Okay, let's keep going.
The movie plays it for drama and laughs, but think about what it's really saying. A woman's fear of losing her beauty makes her capable of monstrosity, not because she's evil, but because she's vain.
Are you actually proposing that Mother Gothel's vanity is speaking for women in general? Are you actually? Okay. By that logic, should we argue that Gaston's womanizing stupidity and brutish behavior speaks for all men? I never looked at Gothel or Gaston or Jafar or Ursula and just assumed they speak for all women. Move on.
Now, rewind to the evil queen in Snow White. She doesn't try to steal the throne. She doesn't even want Snow White dead for political reasons. She wants her dead because a mirror said someone else was prettier. She's a literal queen. She has magic, influence, power, and her plan is to poison a teenager over a bad Yelp review from a piece of talking glass. This isn't complexity, it's caricature. The pattern is painfully clear. Female villains aren't allowed ambition unless it's rooted in appearance.
Okay, first of all, vanity is real. There are people out there who are incredibly vain and will go to desperate lengths to keep their beauty, youth, and fame. They see those with better looks or better appearances as threats. While the actions of the evil queen in Gothel are extreme, they are rooted in relatable sins of pride, vanity, and selfishness. Second of all, your claim that women cannot be ambitious unless it's rooted in appearance? Okay, let me think. There's Ursula, Lady Tremaine, Yzma, Ares, Fairy Godmother, Poison Ivy, Conan, Himiko Toga, Esdeath, Big Mom. All animated villains who were ambitious and powerful, but in no way relating to their appearance. Yeah, I thought those up off the top of my head. Damn.
They don't seek control, they seek compliments. They don't fear failure, they fear being less than another woman. And it's not just lazy writing, it's damaging, because it reinforces the idea that women can't coexist without rivalry, that femininity is fragile, competitive, and shallow by default, that aging or being outshined is something to be feared so deeply it justifies cruelty.
You know, I'm sad that you went here, Toon, but I'm not surprised. I find that a lot of people go here. It's a very old and very exhausting line of logic. A villain does something heinous, and somehow that means the medium is justifying their behavior or rationale. You just said, without irony, that the message of these villains is that their vanity makes their acts of evil justifiable. That's not only wrong, it shows a warped sense of media consumption that reminds me often that critics and writers like ourselves need to take 2 steps back from the media they consume. No, their vanity does not make their acts of evil justified. In fact, perhaps you forgot, but they are the villains. We're not supposed to like what they do, and their rationale doesn't always have to be good. Do you think that Jafar, Hades, or Scar, all male villains who wanted power and recognition, are justified just because what they want seems more relatable? How is Jafar's evil justified by his motivation? How are the actions of Gothel and the evil queen in any way implying that femininity is fragile and built around rivalry? Are you unaware that women like this exist in the world? There are women who can't handle the idea of getting older, so they go for expensive surgeries to look younger. They hold resentment for those who are younger or more beautiful, and they try to cling to their glory days. It's not something we should praise or aspire to. We shouldn't uplift these women for it, but such people do exist, and it is from these dark outlooks that we see these villains arrive. To imply that villains speak for the general public is, I don't know, man. That's a stretch.
Meanwhile, male villains are praised for being tragic or nuanced, even when their motives are just as petty.
He says this while showing Jafar, whose motivation is just as petty but is in no way tragic or nuanced. Bruh, did you even edit?
Syndrome wants revenge because Mr. Incredible brushed him off as a kid. Scar kills Mufasa because he's jealous of his brother's spotlight, but nobody calls them shallow.
Oh, I do. Scar is 100% shallow. But did you just hear yourself? You just said that Scar is jealous of Mufasa's spotlight. Jealousy, that's pettiness. That's no different than the evil queen being jealous of Snow White for being more beautiful. Are you serious?
They're called iconic, and to be fair, the evil queen is also iconic, but if she'd be written today, I think she'd get a lot more critique.
Why? Why would she be more critiqued? No, explain that. Why? What's different about them? Dude, you just said both the evil queen and Scar are iconic, and your rationale is, yeah, but times change. Times are different now. I'm honestly stunned. Why would people look at the evil queen and say, yeah, she's a problem, but Scar's okay? Why? She's iconic because of the evil things she does. She's iconic because of how awful she is. Just like Scar is iconic because of how awful he is. Okay, I will offer this. Okay, I'm going to be nice. I will offer this. If your argument is that in modern day writing, we try to make women too relatable, or we try to make them too redeeming, and thus the evil queen would not work today because of how we would write them today, then I'll give you that one. But if you're referring to the evil queen as she was, saying that as she was back then, she is not good, she's still bad, and we only thought she was good because of the people in that time period, then no, sir, I disagree with that.
In the end, when a man envies, he's Shakespearean. When a woman envies, she's just a hater.
Okay, you're proclaiming sexism without basis. I hate to say it, dude, but this is sounding a little white knighty.
These female villains weren't written to be terrifying, they were written to be insecure. If you're looking to stay away from falling into this trope, make sure your villainess has more deeply rooted motivations that transcend beyond superficial stereotypes.
Yeah, okay, look guys, don't make your woman envious of other women or jealous of others for petty reasons. Only guys can get away with that. Make your women complex and interesting, but not successful. Then they'd be the successful career woman stereotype. But also make sure that they cannot be redeemed, especially if they're beautiful. Oh boy, genuine question, bro. What motivation would you allow a woman to have? Because most villains with deep motivations are spawned from a place of petty insecurity or personal senses of resentment. But you've said if women do this, then it's seen as bad for some reason, and I don't even know the reason. So what would be acceptable? It's okay for Scar to be jealous of his brother, but the evil queen can't be jealous of someone more beautiful than her. It's fine for Syndrome to be petty and resentful of heroes that he wants to kill them all, but it's not okay for Gothel to be so obsessed with herself that she manipulates a girl for her own selfish ends. What are we allowed to do with female villains? Is your argument, and I hate to ask this, is your solution we just shouldn't have female villains anymore because apparently audiences just cannot handle them?
But shallow motives are only half the problem, because even when a female villain starts out evil, the story rarely lets her stay that way.
Again, you make this argument while showing Maleficent, a woman who started evil and died evil. Am I being trolled? Is this a troll video?
4. Redemption at all costs. Take Teka, the towering lava monster from Moana. She scorches oceans, hurls fireballs, and threatens the end of life as we know it. But don't worry, she's not actually bad. She's just missing her heart. Cue the slow motion walk, the swelling music, the whispered,
"They have stolen the heart from inside you, but this does not define you."
a hug, a glow, and suddenly she's not a villain. She's an island with a skincare routine. This isn't a twist, it's a retreat. It's the story saying, don't worry, she was never really dangerous. Her rage wasn't a choice. It was trauma, and once healed, she returns to her true form, beautiful, benevolent, and no longer scary. It's a feel-good message we see attached to a lot of villains nowadays, because in these stories, a woman's evil is never allowed to stand on its own. It has to be explained, justified, or erased.
I'm not even halfway through this video, and there's so much wrong. So much wrong. All right, let's start with the easy one. Taka from Moana. Did you miss the setup of the movie? The whole twist was that Taka was actually the mother of creation. Matanui. Her heart was stolen. She was corrupted as a result. The twist was that she was actually not the villain the whole time, but the victim who needed saving. Am I saying every female villain should be like that? No. But your rationalization is so dishonest. You claim that it's a retreat, as if dodging the point of who she's supposed to be. Why can't you just let her be the villain? Why does she need to be redeemed and made good again? What if the point of the movie was that she was in fact a victim of the wrong of someone else and might need to be made right? Many villains become villains due to the actions of others. I mean, bro, you keep bringing him up, but Syndrome is a good example of this. He was a person who was done wrong and became the villain as a result. And I know that you seem to hate redemption, but sometimes redemption is a good thing. Redemption, believe it or not, can be a very valuable thing to offer to someone else. Sometimes there are people in this world who need a second chance, who need a little bit of help. They need redemption. Plus, maybe the point of the movie was that Taka wasn't meant to be the villain, just an obstacle. That's beside the point of the real issue. Here's the biggest problem with this whole argument. Here's what I really have to say. Toon, you just got through telling us for the past 10 minutes of his video, I know it's been way longer than that for you guys, and I'm sorry, that you don't want villains who are stereotypes, right? You don't just want simple, vain freaks. The male villains get to be complex and unique and with motivations that allow us to try to understand them like Syndrome. But now you literally just said that a woman's evil always has to be explained or justified, and that's a bad thing. So women who do evil shouldn't have a reason for it. There should be no explanation for why they're evil. They just are evil. Did you not go on earlier about the importance of motivations or ideologies, how male characters get to be complex while women don't? And now you're straight up saying remove the complexity or explanation, but rather let it stand on its own? Just let it be a woman who just chooses to be evil? I've never heard anyone say that a character should actually just be a one-note villain. But there it is. And it contradicts almost everything else you've said so far. You cannot on the one hand say, look, female villains should be just as complex and fascinating as male villains, and then follow it up with, why give them a reason or explanation for their villainy? Just make them bad. Despite you saying this, Syndrome, you praise Syndrome for having a backstory, having a reason for why he became it. Now you're saying women shouldn't have an explanation. Okay. Wow. This video is actually hurting me. Oh my gosh. Okay, keep going.
She can be angry, but only if it comes from pain, and if that pain comes from superficial tropes like the jealousy one, it's often regarded as lazy writing. Unlike male villains who can embrace darkness without apology, female villains are put on a tight leash. They must be tragic or misunderstood, or punished swiftly if they dare to enjoy it.
Unlike male villains who don't have to apologize for who they are, female villains always have to be tragic or misunderstood. Again, you say this while showing the evil queen who was neither tragic or misunderstood. And you also say they need to be punished swiftly if they dare to enjoy it. So female villains have to be tragic and misunderstood so they can be redeemed. Or defeated if they aren't. Isn't that every villain ever? They either are a tragic character who gets redeemed or they're defeated for not turning from their evil ways. I don't know what to say. It's like every female villain must be tragic and misunderstood, shows the evil queen who was not tragic or misunderstood. Either you're trolling us or your editor's trolling you and you didn't know it. And then you say, and if they're not tragic or misunderstood, then they need to be punished swiftly for enjoying their evil. Yeah, like every villain ever. That kind of sums up almost every villain. They're either a tragic, misunderstood figure who needs a second chance and a hand to reach out, or they are a corrupted, evil son of a bitch who needs to be stopped by the heroes. As opposed to... what to say?
Rarely is she allowed the dignity of her own darkness. But the truth is, this isn't just lazy storytelling, it's cultural discomfort. because letting women choose villainy freely would mean admitting something even scarier than a fire demon or a death ray. That women, like men, are fully capable of choosing cruelty, not because they were hurt, not because they were unloved, but because they wanted to.
Okay, I'm being trolled. This has got to be trolled. I must be being trolled. Not only are you showing all this with Maleficent in the background, a woman who did choose evil because she wanted to, but also you just got done ragging on Gothel and the Evil Queen for choosing evil not out of hurt or tragedy, but because they were evil. Ah, dude, you're saying that you wish women would just choose evil. Hi, Evil Queen, Mother Gothel, Maleficent. They were not, the Evil Queen and Mother Gothel and Maleficent were never hurt, and it was not based on tragedy. They wanted something, they tried to get it, and they did evil in the this is a troll. Someone tell me I'm being trolled right now, because this is... I can't do that. I'm actually getting a headache. Oh my gosh. Okay, all right. Whew, keep going.
That kind of female villain isn't common, because the stories we tell still aren't ready for her. But if a woman refuses redemption and insists on villainy, the story finds a new box to shove her in. Not a tower, not a lair, a nursery. There's a secret weapon writers use against female villains, a strategy so effective it turns them into ghosts in their own stories. Make them moms. But not complex, multidimensional mothers. Twisted ones, conditional ones, the kind who weaponize care and call it love. Take Lady Tremaine, the wicked stepmother in Cinderella. No magic, no minions, just unshakable control over a domestic prison. She doesn't shout, she doesn't scheme, she doesn't have to. She rules through subtlety, a locked attic, a quiet snub, a delayed invitation, and somehow that makes her feel more dangerous than any fire-breathing dragon. But even then, her power is contained. She's not chasing thrones or changing laws. She just wants to keep one girl from rising above her station. That's the core of this trope. Female villainy isn't allowed to be expansive. It's allowed to be petty, personal, homebound. This kind of writing traps evil within the walls of a household, a place where women have historically been confined anyway. It's not just a metaphor, it's tradition repackaged as fiction. And yet, this trope can work when the story knows what it's doing. Villains like this can be terrifying if they're allowed depth, if their motivations stretch beyond envy or the need to control a child. When writers explore motherhood not just as a role, but as a system of power, a source of identity, loss, and obsession, you get something chilling and honest. You get a villain who feels real. Enter the Baroness from Cruella, a fashion icon, a narcissist, a mother in the most technical, loveless sense of the word. She abandons her child for convenience, manipulates her employees, and treats creation, both artistic and biological, as something she owns, not something she nurtures. And unlike most villains in this trope, she's allowed to enjoy it. She relishes her cruelty. She controls her world through intimidation, glamour, and legacy. And the story doesn't try to explain it away with a tragic past or a redemptive moment. She's not a monster in hiding, she's a monster in plain sight, and she likes it that way. What makes the Baroness work is that her villainy isn't confined to the home. She's not just a bad mother, she's a corporate tyrant, a social manipulator, and a cautionary tale about power unchecked by empathy. She's still within the twisted mother trope, but instead of shrinking her evil to fit it, the film expands the trope to fit her. That's the difference, because when the trope is used to reveal something about society, not just reinforce what we already expect from women, it becomes a storytelling tool.
Okay, so I was editing the video. This is after I finished recording everything, and I'm in the middle of editing the video as I record this. And I came to this part and I realized I missed something and I need to address this. What he's essentially doing, what Toon is doing in this part of the video, is he's comparing the Baroness from Cruella to Lady Tremaine from Cinderella. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but there was something I really missed and I want to hit it. Okay, so here it is. what he basically was saying is that, first of all, the Baroness works because she doesn't need a tragic backstory. She's an awful woman and owns being awful. She enjoys what she does. She doesn't need to justify anything, and she doesn't need to be redeemed. I'm sorry, but how is that any different from Lady Tremaine? They're exactly the same. Lady Tremaine also does not have a tragic backstory. In fact, here's the funniest part. We get a sort of backstory with the Baroness when we find out that she's actually Cruella's mother. Oh yeah, spoilers, whatever. And we also see that Lady Tremaine does not have a backstory. She does not apologize. She is unredeemable. She does not get redeemed. She does not get a second story arc, and she is totally fine with torturing Cinderella. How is this any different? How is this any different? Well, he says his difference. The difference is, unlike Lady Tremaine, who's confined to the household, the Baroness does a lot more with that. She goes out of her way. It's expanded upon, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the other part that I missed, this is the other part I missed, he says that when you use a trope or a writing device to make a statement about society, rather than just going within the expectations, then you have a storytelling device or a storytelling tool. This is wrong because it creates the idea that you have a storytelling tool unless it makes a statement. And I will say this until the day I die when it comes to writing. Making a statement about society should never be the motivation behind character writing. Because if you abandon good character for making statements, then you abandon good storytelling. Characters should not be spokespeople for propaganda, politics, or the fad of the day, because it makes them dated. It makes them uninteresting. You want to know why characters like the Evil Queen and Lady Tremaine are iconic? Because they're not dated. Their attitudes, actions, and evil are things we can recognize in every day and age. But when you say, "Oh, we're going to make a statement about society with this villain," once that statement is no longer relevant or it's no longer talked about, the villain is no longer interesting to us. You want a good iconic character, you want a good iconic storytelling device, don't sacrifice good story for the sake of making statements. So I wanted to call those two things out. That number one, nothing he said good about the Baroness cannot be applied to Lady Tremaine. And two, this idea that you need to be able to make a statement to have a good storytelling tool and a trope is bafflingly wrong. Like, I would stand against this vehemently. Okay, sorry about that. Like I said, I was in the middle of editing when I made this realization, so I just wanted to get that out there. Let's move on. Let's move on.
When it's just another box to trap them in, we're back to where we started. Not a tower, not a lair, a nursery.
I have so much to say. I have so much to say about this. Okay, I'm sorry, but this might be the most brain-dead take I've ever heard. Not only did Toon actually compare Lady Tremaine to the Baroness and claim the Baroness was better. Wild take there. But he contradicted his very first point. Is the Baroness not a successful career woman? Did you not say earlier that Evelyn was a problem for that very same reason? Doesn't this woman, the Baroness, check off at least 3 of your trope issues from earlier? She's a successful career woman, making a huge red flag to the audience that she is a single, childless woman who gave up her child to pursue a personal, petty goal of grandeur and selfish interest. Her villainy is shallow and built entirely on appearance and looking better than everyone else, so there's the vanity. She resents Cruella because she's outshining her, so that makes her jealous. You've white knighted so hard, you actually contradicted the first half of your video. Because you said that those things are bad, and yet the Baroness works? Okay. I have more to say, but I'm going to see if he addresses this. Okay, let's keep going.
While female villains are boxed into homes and motherhood, male villains are given kingdoms, empires, entire galaxies to burn. Because when a man chooses evil, the story rolls out a red carpet. Same crime, different punishment. Welcome to villain gender bias.
Ooh, and there it is. There it is. Women don't get to take over the world, blow up planets, or destroy cities, or do the cool villain things. They just do domestically bad things. So that makes Lady Tremaine so much worse as a villain because she's relegated to a home and being a mother. Well, Maybe that's because not every story is one that deals with world-ending threats or superheroes fighting for control. Maybe some stories really are about an abused stepdaughter who wants to escape her cruel stepmother. There's nothing at all wrong with that. The fact that you think it's demeaning for a woman to be a motherly figure and have her own agency in it sounds unbelievably sexist. Lady Tremaine is an excellent villain. She breaks every trope you laid out. She is not just a businesswoman with a big career, but a woman of high station with a family. She is not redeemed in the end, but soundly defeated. Her motivation is not based on jealousy, but also out of the interest of her daughters and the desire for higher power and station in the kingdom through her daughter's betrothal to the prince. And she isn't just too pretty to be a villain, unless you're into the older woman thing. I mean, I suppose there's some folks that are into that, I guess. I mean, there's a lid for every jar. I digress. She doesn't need to be a villain on the level of the Joker. She's plenty bad enough for the context of her story. Why do you think every villain needs to be a at least city-level threat? Sometimes a villain is just a burglar, or just a murderer, or just an abusive father. I mean, for God's sake, Clayton in Tarzan just wanted to capture and kill gorillas for money. The Dursleys are just trying to confine Harry Potter to their home indefinitely so that they can abuse and torture him to make themselves feel better. Maclay just wants to hunt a rare eagle in the rescue down under or whatever. Gaston just wants to get his crush to like him. Not every villain is out to take over the world. Some villains, in fact, most villains, are just doing what they do for themselves, be that as minimal or grandiose as they please. But to say that Hollywood's solution to the woman villain is to just make them a mother figure who just controls a small household scenario is ridiculously false. Even if we were to make this dumb argument, I could name plenty of female villains who do aim for higher things than mere household control. Ursula, Maleficent, Poison Ivy, Esdeath, Medusa, Yzma, Himiko Toga. Hell, how about Evelyn Deavor? You brought her up earlier. It fascinates me that you are contradicting your earlier examples and points so quickly.
Welcome, 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 welcome.
Take Syndrome from The Incredibles. He's petty, entitled, and driven by a childhood grudge. A man-baby with a death ray, and yet we call him thematically rich, because his villainy ties into the film's commentary on meritocracy and mediocrity.
Hey guys, so I was editing the video, and I came across this part, and it shocked me. Mostly because I must have missed it. And I know, I'm sorry, I'm making this video way longer than before, and I apologize for that, but I feel like I need to say this. So what Toon says here is that Syndrome is a man-baby with a death ray, but it's okay because his villainy ties into the movie's themes of meritocracy and mediocrity. Okay, so first of all, I think back on The Incredibles. It's been a while since I watched it, but I think back on it. I don't think there was a single theme in The Incredibles that had to do with meritocracy or mediocrity. This feels like a political talking point more than anything. Let's actually talk about what The Incredibles was teaching. When I look back on it, The Incredibles movie seems to have two themes going on in conjunction with each other. First is the idea of excellence versus conformity. Bob, Mr. Incredible, was a man who valued his excellence and hates having to conform. He's working a dead-end job where he can't help people with a cruel boss who keeps him tied down. He is forced to deny who he is and what he loves. Meanwhile, Jack and Violet, his children, are also told to conform. Jack especially wants to embrace his powers and wants to be himself and express who he is, but he's told he can't, and it hurts him, so he acts out. He behaves like a delinquent. He pulls pranks because he's desperate to be who he wants to be the person he's always wanted to be, and no one will let him. Meanwhile, Helen is very much the conformist. Mrs. Incredible is a conformist. She tries to not ever use her powers. She discourages it from her husband and kids and is hesitant to even embrace her old superhero lifestyle even when she knows that she should. Violet, the daughter, as a result, resents her uniqueness and takes a long time to truly break from this shy and conformed girl that she's become. And she wishes she could be normal, and that's largely because she's watched her mom try to enforce that in her. Syndrome's famous line, "When everyone is super, no one will be," echoes this theme. When we all conform to society and try not to embrace our differences or strengths or unique talents, we will just fade away, becoming nobody. But at the same time, there's another theme at play. Self-reliance versus responsibility. From the beginning, we already see this is a problem for Bob. Even in his youth, he was always a loner who did things in his own way. He neglected Buddy, who needed a mentor and direction. He was late for his own wedding because he was obsessed with his excellence and his job. And he lies to his wife constantly about what he does because he's too self-reliant on himself and his own power. Meanwhile, Helen is responsible, putting all of her effort into her family, her children, and their well-being. Part of the importance of the film are these two sides. Bob and Helen learning to recognize the importance and weaknesses of both. Helen had to remember that who they are isn't something to be ashamed of, and they shouldn't deny their strengths and abilities because it only hurts them in the long run. While Bob had to learn that he has responsibilities to others, and he can't be a self-centered man focused on his own excellence and glory when there are people that rely on him. Now look at Syndrome in relation to these things. He perfectly embodies their antithesis. He learned as a young boy not to rely on others because of how Mr. Incredible treated him. And instead he uses people for his own gain, becoming cold and uncaring about the sanctity of life, even risking Mirage's life, his own wife's life, just to prove his point. His drive to excel and be a hero is not because he wants to do good, but because he's seeking approval. He first wanted Mr. Incredible to approve of him, and then later he wants the world to approve of him. He is the foil to the whole point of balancing these extremes. He becomes a much darker example of what Mr. Incredible showed him to be. He is a man bent on his own excellence, who refused to conform and took no responsibility for other people, instead obsessing with going alone and proving himself, all for the sake of attaining approval. Syndrome is a man baby because he's only interested in approval like a child who never got it growing up and now wants it in his adult years. It has nothing to do with meritocracy or mediocrity. I wonder if Toon even understands what meritocracy is, or if he even understands the subtle themes of The Incredibles. I thought it was a movie that did excellent work in displaying these themes and excellent characterization. I'm sorry, I know that I just went off on a little tangent there. I apologize, but I felt like I had to say something about this. The more I look back on this, even while I'm editing this video, the more I'm like, man, this was a bad take. This was a really bad take. Gotta wonder why Toon did it. Moving on.
He's allowed to be a brat and still be brilliant, still be terrifying. Or look at Scar from The Lion King. Jealous, dramatic, dripping with sarcasm. He literally sings a song about committing murder while posing on cliffs and talking to green fire. But we don't call him shallow, we call him iconic. Dr. Facilier, Jafar, Hades, they all get to be charming, flamboyant, over the top, and unapologetically evil. They don't even need a redemption arc. They don't need to be hot. They don't need to be sad. They're allowed to be fun. But give those same qualities to a female villain, suddenly she's too much, too dramatic, too cold, too sexy, too loud. She's either flattened into a cliche or softened into a sob story.
All right. I think it's time that we ask the ultimate question here. I think it's time we ask the ultimate question because Toon is making a lot of claims. But it's time for me to ask a question about these claims. And here's the question. Says who? Says who? Where are you getting these arguments? That petty male villains are allowed to be petty man babies, but women can't be. Who has called the Evil Queen, Lady Tremaine, Mother Gothel, Ursula, Maleficent, or any of these villains petty, shallow, and weak? Where do you get that information? I want to know, because your entire video hinges on this point. In order for you to make the claim that you do, that male villains are allowed to be petty, power-hungry, and conceited, but women can't be, or to be called good villains, who says that? Because I will be honest, maybe I'm too sheltered, maybe I haven't seen it, but I've never seen anyone make those arguments. I have heard people talk about why the Evil Queen and Lady Tremaine are exceptionally good villains. How they're terrifying. How they're brutal. And when people do call them shallow, yeah, but they also call Scar shallow. I've heard people say that Scar doesn't make a great villain because he just doesn't do much himself. He lets the hyenas do everything, and then when it's finally time for him to do something, he doesn't put up much of a fight. He runs from conflict. I've heard people say that Jafar... My own dad doesn't like Jafar. He thinks that Jafar is kind of a weak villain. I disagree. I think he's a great villain, but at the same time, who says that all male villains can be petty and man babies, and that's fine, but women can't be? Who says that? And follow-up question, if it's true, what's your solution? No more female villains? We need to change the way Hollywood talks about things? I don't know what your goal here is.
Hela in Thor Ragnarok was a goddess of death with presence, power, and a killer entrance. She literally destroyed Thor's hammer with one hand. But was she given depth? Stakes?
Why would she be given those? Depth and stakes? What? Why would you want her to have those? I thought you said in your fourth trope that it was bad to justify a woman's evil or explain it. So you don't want depth or stakes. You don't want explanation or rationality. Move on.
Nope. She was shoved into the evil sister box and killed off with a giant fire monster so the hero could complete his arc. Bellatrix Lestrange in Harry Potter had so much potential, a twisted reflection of feminine chaos devoted to Voldemort with religious fervor. But even with Helena Bonham Carter chewing the scenery, Bellatrix was never treated as her own force. She was a sidekick, a lapdog, even her death is offhanded, a quick gotcha moment in a battle scene dominated by men.
Okay. I hope I don't have to explain to my audience how this whole video is just very feminist propaganda now, right? The reason Bellatrix is not as impactful is because she's not the main villain. But to pretend like she didn't do anything is to ignore her hand in killing Sirius Black, her part in making Neville who he is. I mean, yeah, she was killed in the end, but in a battlefield dominated by men. Wow. Like, that was really the relevant issue of Harry Potter. Are you actually claiming that we're sexist to female villains? Is that actually the claim? Ironic, considering Harry Potter was written by J.K. Rowling, who herself is a feminist. Okay. Okay.
And then there's She-Hulk, a show that teased a female villain in Titania, bold, confident, and entertainingly narcissistic. But instead of developing her, the writers turned her into a joke. No threat, no agenda, just a walking meme who crashes into scenes, sues people over trademark law, and disappears again.
Alright, to be fair, if you went to She-Hulk expecting any kind of good writing, then that's on you, not on the show. Actually, it is kind of on the show. The show's bad. That show is so bad.
The pattern is clear. If a female villain is fun, she's not dangerous. If she's dangerous, she can't be fun. And if she's both, then the story doesn't know what to do with her.
Do you believe there are any good female villains? Because by this, it seems like you don't think there are any. What would you define as a good female villain?
Even Jack Horner, whose entire shtick is that he has no depth, no trauma, and no morality, is treated as a bold storytelling choice, a satire of modern villains. Audiences love him, just like I do.
I'm Big Jack Horner.
Not in spite of his cartoonish evil, but because of it. Can you imagine a female villain being written like that, with no tragic backstory, no guilt, no humanity, and still being embraced? She'd be called unhinged. She'd be laughed off the screen. And by Act 3, she'd either be dead or redeemed through tears and eyeliner.
A bold claim, and one based on literally your own opinion. My God, this video is hard to sit through. May I also point out how you constantly swap your standards when it suits you? First, female villains need backstories that tie to the heroes and creative ideologies, as you said with Evelyn, because she needs to be more like Syndrome. But now you say that's bad and that they should just be evil for the sake of evil. Can you pick a standard and stay with it, bruh?
Male villains are allowed to enjoy their evil. They're allowed to own it, to monologue, manipulate, explode, betray, and win for a while. Female villains, they're allowed to feel bad about it.
Okay. This feels like, okay, have you ever white knighted so hard that you actually killed the princess you were trying to save from the dragon and said it was for her own good? I think I'm seeing that right now. In your attempt to save female villains, you are ruining them. You're throwing shade on every popular female villain written because they don't meet standards you think they should, rather than try to appreciate what makes them unique as they are. Like, first you say they can't be CEOs or career women because that's a stereotype, and yet you say the Baroness is okay. Still don't know why that is. Then you can't be too pretty. Women, like, female villains can't be too pretty because then they'll be redeemable. Because women shouldn't be redeemed. Bold take, but okay. They shouldn't be petty because that's what men are allowed to be, not women. Men can be petty and jealous. Women can't be. That's bad. They also can't be mothers or domestic in lifestyle. They have to strive for at least city-level destruction or it's just not worth anything. Again, I don't get that. They also have to own their evil. Stop trying to have backstories or reason for why they're evil. They're just evil. Everyone knows women are just evil and will choose to be. There's no reason to go into any depth or explanation or complexity. Just let them choose to be evil and own it. Oh, but wait. If they do that, then they're just unhinged and audiences won't like them. All of this, all of the things you've said, are based on nothing more than your standards and your say-so. I've never heard anyone make these claims before. I'll be honest. I've been watching cartoons and fantasy movies and Disney movies since I was a kid, and I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people about them. But I've never heard anyone make these kind of claims about female villains. Okay, we're almost done. Let's just finish this video. Let's go.
But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. Not every female villain is doomed to be a sexy wallpaper, a jealous wreck, or someone's twisted mom. Some writers actually remember that evil has no gender. They give us villainesses who are powerful, terrifying, and, most importantly, allowed to be evil on their own terms. Ursula, the sea witch from The Little Mermaid, demolishes the standard female villain template. She's loud, grotesque, and gloriously wicked, unapologetically herself. Audiences embraced her as a queer or feminist icon precisely because she breaks the mold of dainty femininity. She's plus-sized, powerful, and confident. Beauty standards don't define her villainy. It's determined by raw ambition and ruthless execution. Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender is another rarity. She's a teenager, yes, but also a military prodigy, a master manipulator, and a genuinely terrifying strategist. She's not driven by heartbreak or jealousy, she's driven by perfectionism, fear of failure, and a deep hunger for control. Her breakdown doesn't redeem her, it haunts us. Because, for once, we're allowed to see a female villain unravel without being forgiven. And then there's Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove. She drives the plot rather than reacting to it. She's never sidelined, never reduced to feminine stereotypes, never apologizing for her ambition. These characters prove one crucial truth. Compelling female villains don't need gendered constraints. They can be as threatening, complex, and unapologetic as any male villain, when writers have the courage to let them.
Okay, finally, he decided to name some female villains he likes. Finally, and yes, I agree. All three of these are good. Ursula's good. Azula's excellent. Yzma's okay, she's fine. But, I wonder if you realize that all I have to do is apply some of your own criticisms to them, and I can make them look bad by your own standards. I mean, I'm glad you're at least acknowledging that these are good villains, but why do you detract from the good qualities of the previous ones? Like, for example, you praise Ursula, Azula, and Yzma for not being apologetic, being in control, and doing heinous evil things without remorse. Okay, so did the Evil Queen. So did Lady Tremaine. So did Mother Gothel. All women you criticized, None of them apologized or repented. They all did dastardly evil things. They owned their evil, but you changed your stance for them. Like Gothel was petty, vain, and so she's not good. But so are Ursula and Yzma. They're petty and vain. They just want power. How are they excluded? And even more, you said that we need to lose the successful career woman. Is Yzma not a successful career woman? Even before she tried to kill Kuzco, she was his vizier or right hand woman. You know, like she had power. She was a successful career woman. She just wanted more. Not a lot of motivation. In fact, there wasn't a lot of ideological motivation behind Yzma. There's not a lot of ideological motivation. Or Ursula, for that matter. They just wanted power. I thought you said they needed some motivation. Oh, wait, no, that's right. No, they can't have that. There can't be explanation as to why they're evil. They just have to own it. Do you see how suddenly all these things start contradicting? And so even when you say that these three villainesses are good, all I have to do is look back at your video and go, hold on, don't they break these molds? Don't they contradict some of your claims? But I just want to wrap this up. Leave it alone. Let's wrap it up.
The ultimate message cuts to the core. Womanhood should never disqualify you from being the most terrifying force in the room. Female evil doesn't require tragic backstories, sexy outfits, or mother issues as permission slips. The best villainesses own their wickedness completely, unconstrained by tropes, stereotypes, or society's discomfort with powerful women who choose darkness.
What? What are you pausing for? The video's almost over. I just want this done. Shut up. Move on. I want to close this out.
Great stories have great villains. It's about time we let women be gloriously, unforgettably evil. And if you want to learn how to do it right, how to build a villain reveal that actually lands regardless of their gender, check out our video on how to foreshadow a twist villain. Because the best villains don't just surprise you, they make you say, "Oh, of course."
Okay, we're done. It's over. It's done. What did I just watch? Let me just start by this. I'm going to start by apologizing. This is probably one of the longest response videos I've ever done, and I apologize. Let me say this good. I don't think Toon is a bad video maker. I never heard of him until now. This is the first video I've ever watched from him. He may make great videos other than this one, but this one is definitely a miss. And based on what I saw, he's got good production value. He's got a good presentation voice. His video is well put together, although some of the editing, like I said, is questionable. And that makes me wonder if this was a troll on me or a troll on him from his editors. I don't know. But overall, this video was a problem. And I think I could break down the problem into two parts. The first part is, I really do feel like his issue here is he lacks consistency in his point. He contradicts himself numerous times from the first part of his video into the second part of his video. Like, it's bad that a villain is just a career woman, but the Baroness is okay. And she's definitely a career woman. Women cannot be, like, a woman can't have jealous or petty reasons for their motivation. But at the same, like, they shouldn't have jealous or petty reasons for their motivation. But men are allowed to have them. Why can't women? Then women, like, we should have clear and concise ideology and motivation for why our women do what they do. But then also don't explain why women do what they do. They just need to choose evil and own that evil. There's constant flip-flopping. And it's often the act of a person who does not have a singular principle, but wants to uphold an ideology of their own and will flip-flop to what they need to uphold that ideology. At the end of the day, it creates this idea that female villains just can't do anything right. So it's shocking when you actually say, oh, but these three, Ursula, Yzma, and Azula, are good. How? Because if I hold them up to the scrutiny you did earlier, they will have faults. They will have problems that you brought up. I don't know. The second problem I see is this video felt a little bit motivated by a feminist angle. Like, there were definitely some lines in this video that I thought, this feels a little white knighty. This feels a little kind of force-feeding of feminism. And I don't think that should ever be a motivation when talking about how to write characters. You should leave personal, political, or sociological ideologies out of that kind of thing. Unless your goal with writing is to insert those, and do that at your own risk, because those are very difficult to do well in writing. In my opinion, the thing that we need to really ask is, and I asked it earlier, but I'll ask it again, who are the ones making the claims you are besides yourself? Besides yourself, who are the ones making the claims that female villains are bad, that they are being written poorly, that there is a double standard in Hollywood for how female villains are treated? Who are the ones saying that? And are we all proclaiming it as bad? See, the funny thing for me is, I think that female villains have the potential to be very different from male villains. Like, I'll give you an example, and I'll use Evelyn versus Syndrome, since you brought up Syndrome so much. Syndrome was loud, bombastic, and very bratty. He wanted people to know how amazing he was. He wanted to be the hero in everyone's hearts. And he wanted it so bad that he tried to kill all the other heroes and then create a monster that only he could defeat. In the end, though, he couldn't defeat it because he wasn't a real hero. He was just a scumbag who was too high on his own glory. That's the problem with Syndrome, okay? That's a villain. He was petty. He was selfish. He was greedy. He was power hungry. He wanted revenge. And yeah, that's pettiness, but it comes from a place of understanding because of his backstory. And he was loud and destructive for it. Evelyn, meanwhile, was subtle. She does not reveal she's a villain until much later. She tries to play the cards. She tries to manipulate the heroes. She tries to turn them against each other. She is not as outspoken or bombastic. She's trying to play under the radar. And sometimes that's a really good villain who can play under the radar. She's not like Syndrome in the sense that she wants to be loud and bombastic, or she wants to have the glory on herself. In her eyes, she sees herself as trying to help the world because she thinks that the dependence on superheroes is a problem. Why? Because she lost her father because of dependence on superheroes. So in a sense, Evelyn is just as interesting, if not more interesting than Syndrome. Sure, she's not as loud and bombastic. She's not making as big a scene. She's not doing all this out of personal revenge or vendetta. She's doing it because she thinks that the world needs to get over their hero worship. Very Lex Luthor-like, which Lex Luthor is a wonderful villain. So, honestly, I don't understand a lot of the issues that are taken here. I feel like this is a fabricated issue that was come up with, that someone came up with, either Toon or someone that Toon was talking to. If there are people out there making this claim about female villains, I'd love to meet them. I'd love to know what their issues are. And I'd also love to ask them, okay, how would you write female villains and keep them all from being exactly the same? Because sure, Ursula, Yzma, and Azula are good villains. But if they're the only three good villains that don't break any molds for you, that don't break any problems, eventually you're going to run out of female villains to write. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get repeats. Especially when you realize that Ursula, Yzma, them especially, Azula's a different box altogether. We can get back to her. But Ursula and Yzma were based almost entirely around pettiness. Petty desire for power. Which you said audiences don't respect in women villains. Really? And then Azula. Azula is a one-of-a-kind villainess. She is absolutely a monster, and she has a lot of presence and power. So definitely an awesome villain. I do not deny that. But at the same time, you said earlier that a lot of women are motivated by insecurities, and Azula had insecurities. We see a lot of those manifest in the end of the show, especially in the book 3 Fire, where she's having her breakdown, seeing images of her mother in the mirror, where she's talking on the beach and saying that she resented the fact that her mother called her a monster. She has her own insecurities. She has her own problems. But I thought we weren't supposed to have problems. I hope you're starting to see what I'm getting at here. Again, I don't have any ill will towards Toon. I just thought this was a really bad take. Oh, now I've got a headache and I need to lay down for a while. Thank you guys for watching. This was a long one. I'll see you in my next video. Take care, guys.